ahead and get started. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's June 20 administrative meeting. We have no announcements, so let me just go right to our first order of business. I move we approve the minutes for the June 13th administrative meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted. Now turn to our Executive Secretary for our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no consent agenda. The first item on the administrative agenda is Verizon Maryland LLC, filed on June 1, 2018, revised tariff pages. The company proposes to reduce certain intrastate terminating access rates.
Good morning, Commissioners. Janice Flynn for item number 1. Verizon is revising its access service tariff to reduce the intrastate terminating tandem switched access rates to 0. This reduction will bring the company into compliance with the 7th and final step of the FCC's Connect America Fund order. The order requires carriers to transition to the bill and keep methodology for terminating tandem switched access service by July 3, 2018. Staff has reviewed the filing and finds that it complies with the FCC order. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of July 3, 2018.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? If not, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of July 3rd, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
Thank you.
The second item on the administrative agenda is Verizon Maryland LLC, filed on May 22, 2018, revised tariff pages. The company proposes to remove references to party line service from its tariff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. In what may seem like a throwback to simpler times,
What?
this
No more party
certainly
lines?
evoked a sense of nostalgia. Party line service, not exactly a hot topic nowadays. This item addresses a filing by Verizon to eliminate references to party line services. Simple fact, they've eliminated the service many years ago. Therefore, right now it's sort of obsolete to continue. And they obviously were cleaning up tariff, and they saw this and said, "Let's take care of that." The Commission, therefore, staff recommends that the Commission accept the revised tariff sheets, which eliminate references to party line services.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the Commission accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of June 22nd, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
Item number 3 is GetGo Communications, LLC, filed on July 25, 2017, revised tariff pages reflecting the company's name change.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by Citrix Communications, LLC, proposing to change its name to GetGo Communications, LLC, and revise its tariff pages to reflect the name change. In addition, the company is revising its switched access rate pursuant to Step 6 of the Connect America Fund order. The company has notified all customers of the name change through email communications and/or invoice updates. Staff sees no basis to object to the name change and the implementing tariff changes. The FCC's CAF order has required most telecommunication carriers to gradually reduce terminating intrastate switched access rates to 0 in 7 annual steps via tariff filings at state utility commissions. Under this Commission's order of May 16, 2017, carriers were required to file their Step 6 filings by July 1, 2017, to be effective by July 31, 2017. Citrix did not file its change until March 14, 2018, approximately 8 months after the deadline. Accordingly, staff believes it appropriate to assess a civil penalty of $100 on the company. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariff for filing and direct the company to file clean copies of the effective tariff pages with an effective date of June 20th, 2018. Staff also recommends the company be assessed a civil penalty of $100 for noncompliance with the Commission's 2017 Notice of Required Access Tariff Filings.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of questions. Did the company react at all to the recommendation for the civil penalty?
I'll let Ms. Suckling speak
Good
to
morning,
that.
Commissioners. Karen Suckling on behalf of staff. I sent an email to the company explaining staff's recommendation and why we were making that recommendation, and they replied saying that they do not dispute staff's recommendation for the penalty.
Oh, okay. So even, I just noted of interest that they didn't have any switched access customers, so, but they're fine with it then?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions?
I got a question. So
Commissioner Noble?
I wanted to ask you what the basis of the $100 was. How did you arrive at that figure?
I arrived at that figure based on previous recommendations by staff. I looked at last year when there were certain carriers that didn't reduce from step 5 to step 6 in a amount of time that we saw, well, past the CAF order that the requirement. So I just based it off previous recommendations.
I see. Okay. I was just curious as to the background. Thank you.
Commissioner Herman?
Ms. Suckling, thank you for this, but the question I had is the one we just did with Verizon. They're on step 7, so these folks are on step 6, so are they already late on 7?
No, they're not. I included a footnote in the write-up just explaining, so they reduced their rate to 0 already.
Okay.
And so step 7 would have been if they had any own tandem switches, which they would further have to reduce to 0, so they already comply with
So
step
they already
7.
complied with 7, so they just missed 6.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Great. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing, direct the company to file clean copies of the affected tariff pages with an effective date of June 20th, 2018, and direct the company to pay a civil penalty of $100 to the Commission for noncompliance with the Commission's 2017 notice of required access tariff filings.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item number 4 is IM Telecom LLC, DBA Infinity Mobile, Conatel Inc., filed on March 26, 2018, notice of transfer of ownership and control.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. This addresses a filing by Conatel Companies and IM Telecom, which does business as Infinity Mobile. I'll refer to them as Infinity. They notified the Commission of a transaction that will transfer ownership of Infinity to Conatel Inc., known as Conatel Parent. In Maryland, the Commission has designated Infinity as an eligible telecommunications carrier, ETC, for the provision of Lifeline services. An ETC provides services for low-income customers, and they receive a subsidy from the Federal Universal Service Fund. Mr. Trevin Morrow is the owner of Infinity, pursuant to a contract that the parties executed. Mr. Morrow will transfer all of his interests in Infinity to Conatel Parent. After the transaction, Infinity will be a direct wholly owned subsidiary of Conatel Parent, and the filing included organizational charts for both before and after this acquisition. Infinity does not constitute a telephone company under the Public Utilities Article. Therefore, they're not a public service company under the Commission's jurisdiction. As a result, the Commission does not have direct jurisdiction over this transaction. However, under federal law, the state commissions do have primary responsibility for designating ETCs, so there is obviously some aspects of Commission authority here. ETC must notify the Commission when there's a material change in the information in the application in which the ETC requested authorization, and that's the authorization that's triggered in this instance. So therefore, staff recommends that the Commission note the transfer of ownership of Infinity to Conatel Parent.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we note the transfer of ownership of Infinity Mobile to Conatel Inc.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
We can take items 5 and 6 together. It is filings by SCD Energy Advisors LLC, filed on April 23, 2018, an application for license to supply electricity for electric generation services in the state of Maryland. And item number 6 is CSD Energy Advisors LLC, filed on April 23, 2018, an application for a license to supply natural gas or natural gas supply services in the state of Maryland.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. These items address requests by CSD to operate as a broker and aggregator of electricity and natural gas for commercial and industrial customers. Their management has significant experience in the energy industry. There is no history of complaints against the other company in the other states in which they are operating. Based on this information, staff believes that CSD is qualified to act and operate as a broker and aggregator. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission authorize CSD to operate as an aggregator and broker for natural gas and electricity.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Great. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for items 5 and 6 to grant the company licenses to operate as an electricity supplier and as a natural gas supplier in Maryland, limited to broker and aggregator services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff. Direct the company to provide marketing and training materials specific to its Maryland operations to the Commission staff 30 days prior to utilization of the materials in Maryland. And lastly, direct the company to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the applications.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted.
Item number 7 is Better Cost Control LLC, filed on May 17, 2018, a request to cancel its license to operate as an electricity supplier in Maryland.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Dean on behalf of staff. Item 7 is a filing by Better Cost Control LLC requesting cancellation of its electricity supplier license. Comar 20.54.03.05A requires a supplier to provide 60 days notice of its intention to cease providing services to customers in all or part of its service area. As noted in staff's comments, Better Cost Control has no outstanding assessments, no open complaints, and no customers in the state. Staff recommends that the Commission cancel the company's electricity supplier license.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we cancel the company's license to supply electricity in Maryland.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted.
Item 8 is Palmco Energy Maryland LLC, filed on May 17, 2018, notification of the addition of the DBA Indra Energy to its electricity and natural gas supplier licenses.
Good morning, Commissioners. Peter Wilson on behalf of the staff. Palmco Power MD, an electricity broker, and Palmco Energy MD, a gas broker, notified the Commission of their intention to trade as Indra Energy beginning in the summer of 2018. Palmco has 3 open complaints with the Office of External Affairs and no outstanding assessments with the Commission. Staff has confirmed that Palmco is the owner of the trade name Indra Energy with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. Accordingly, staff recommends the Commission note the filings.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
I had a couple questions.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to ask you about the 3 active complaints that are on file with the OER and what the nature of those complaints are.
Alexander Speck for staff. At the time these comments were written, there were 3 open complaints from 2016 and 1 open complaint that was actually just filed a month ago. Of the 3 open complaints, slamming was one, a billing dispute was another, and another one was trouble canceling a contract. 2 of those 3 have been closed since then, and the other one we were informed is going to be closed soon, as early as today. So those, the company answered to those complaints back in 2016. There was just a backlog that took some time.
Do you know if they were closed in favor of the complainant or in favor of the company?
I'm not sure about that. But I do want to mention that the one that was filed a month ago was really a billing complaint against Pepco, and the company was just mentioned as in reference to that complaint.
And going forward, will complaints against Indira be attributed to the Palmco entity?
I'm not sure how OER links those 2 together, but my thinking is that they would somehow link the 2 together.
Tied. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Is there a motion?
I'm sorry, I had a question.
Oh, I apologize. Okay, please, Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know if Palmco, good morning, staff, do we know if Palmco is going to continue marketing as their own entity in addition to Indra as well?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Is there any concern that, in effect, Palmco is going to have two separate entities marketing under one license?
I don't think that that's something that we've really been concerned about in the past. But if you want, we can look into that further.
Okay. I know that we don't have their marketing materials yet, so it might be worth taking a look at least paying attention to, once their marketing materials are here and we're able to take a look at those and see
We can do that.
see how they plan on marketing, and if it looks like truly two different companies marketing under one license. That's it.
That's it? Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, given these questions, did we want to have any discussion on this? Are we prepared for a motion?
I don't think we have enough now to hold it up.
Okay.
But I think it's worth staff and perhaps the Office of External Relations just to monitor it and see how things move going forward.
Okay, great. Well, is there a motion?
Yes, I move we note the filing.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adopted.
Item number 9 is HYCO Energy LLC and Major Energy Electric Services LLC, filed on May 23, 2018. Notification of an assignment of customer contracts from HYCO Energy LLC to Major Energy Electric Services.
Peter Wilson again for staff. HYCO Energy LLC and Major Energy Electric Services LLC have notified their customers and the Commission pursuant to Comar 20.53.07.12 that 9 residential customer accounts have been assigned by HYCO to Major. Staff has reviewed the notification letters sent to customers informing them of the assignment and determined that they were timely, gave adequate notice, and met the requirements of the regulations. In addition, neither company has any unresolved complaints or outstanding assessments with the Commission. Accordingly, staff recommends the Commission note the filing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Just a quick question. So HYCO transfers to Major their 9 customers, but they're going to maintain the ability to acquire new customers in Maryland. Am I reading that right in the materials?
That's correct.
Give me a sense of the purpose for what's going on here in plain language.
I'll defer that to the analyst.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Bonikowski for staff. My understanding is that there are some mergers going on between different companies right now, and that the customer transfer is either in preparation of a merger or a result from a merger that's in progress right now. My general sense is they're just trying to consolidate customers under single licenses.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
I
Any
might
other questions?
add that we'll have coming up some of those notices of mergers, and I've noticed that at least one of them involves Major Energy.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion?
For item 9, Mr. Chairman, I move we note the filing.
A second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted.
Item number 10 is Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, filed on May 8, 2018, request for a waiver of CPCN requirement for a project to modify an existing overhead transmission line to reliably supply the redevelopment of the Sparrows Point property in Baltimore County.
Michael Dean again on behalf of staff. Item 10 is a request filed by the Baltimore Gas Electric Company to waive the requirement to obtain a certificate of public convenience and necessity for its work at Sparrows Point in Baltimore County on an existing 115 kilovolt overhead transmission line. Under Public Utilities Section 7-207B4, the Commission is authorized to waive the requirement to obtain a certificate of public convenience and necessity if the construction does not require the electric company to obtain new real property or rights of way through eminent domain, or require larger or higher transmission line structures to accommodate increased voltage or larger conductors. Under Section 7-207B3, the Commission may waive the requirement to obtain the certificate of public convenience and necessity for work on an overhead transmission line for good cause shown. The proposed work involves a 2.1-mile 115 kilovolt transmission line that runs from the Riverside substation to the finishing mill and Steelside substations, which, as discussed in staff's comments, were previously owned and maintained by the former steel mill. And will decommission and remove those two substations and install a new Fitzsill substation and replace 9 weathering steel lattice towers and 3 galvanized steel towers with 18 weatherized steel poles that are about 9 feet higher than the existing structures and use a slightly larger conductor. TradePoint Atlantic, which owns the industrial property at Sparrows Point, has granted Baltimore Gas and Electric Company the necessary real property for the small modification in the route and increased right-of-way. The new route substantially follows the former route, except for a straightening of the turn near the existing finishing mill substation. There are no residences in the vicinity of the project, which is all on industrial property. If a waiver of the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity requirement is granted, Baltimore Gas and Electric plans to commence work in July 2018 with completion within 12 to 18 months. Staff has reviewed the proposed overhead transmission line work, which essentially replaces 2 substations with the Fitzsill substation and the transmission line to it, and agrees that with the conclusion that a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity with its analysis of the criteria under 7-207E2 is not required. Our work will be on the industrial property with existing transmission line with no residences within the vicinity of the work. If a waiver is granted, Baltimore Gas Electric will still need to comply with all state environmental regulations for the work. For the reasons noted in staff comments, staff recommends that the Commission grant the waiver of the requirement to obtain a Certificate of Public Inconvenience and Necessity under Public Utilities Section 7-207B3II for good cause shown for the work described in the filing. Following the completion of the staff comments, the Power Plant Research Program notified staff that the agency does not object to the granting of a waiver for the work, but noted 2 issues that would have to be addressed. There's a wetlands area in the corner of the property, so the company would need to contact the Maryland Department of the Environment, and because of the history of the industrial property, the company would need to check for and follow all guidelines for possibly contaminated soil during the decommissioning and removal of the old infrastructure and the installation of the new infrastructure. These issues were passed on to the Baltimore Gas Electric Company, which reported that it's progressing through the permitting process for the work with the county, the Maryland Department of the Environment, and the Army Corps of Engineers regarding the wetlands, and is engaged with the developer of the property for compliance with a site-wide health and safety plan and a formal work plan, which will be submitted to the Maryland Department of the Environment.
Right. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for staff?
I have some questions.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the 7 justifications for good cause that are in the write-up. Most of them seem geared towards good cause for the need for the project, but not necessarily addressing directly the need for a waiver of the CPCN process. In other words, they address, we need to improve reliability, we need to improve the infrastructure so we can develop the property. Those things don't necessarily address good causes for waiving the CPCN process, do they? In other words, those things could occur and be obtained through the CPCN process as well.
Yes, they could. However, staff notes that although not directly addressed in complete form in the write-up, the Commission has authority to waive the requirement for a certificate of public convenience and necessity for good cause shown. In this case, the analysis criteria for a certificate of public convenience and necessity under 7-207E2 would review all those criteria there, but it's not entirely necessary to do so. For example, the first criteria is stability and reliability of the electric system. Well, this is replacement of the transmission line connecting up to a substation, so there's not really an effect on that. Economics would seem to indicate for approval of the project. Aesthetics is not a major concern, given that it's following basically the same route as the prior transmission line, and is installing weatherized poles instead of the large lattice structures, and there's no residences in the area. The issue of historic sites is not really important here because it's on industrial land that's been heavily used. Aviation safety is mainly a criteria for new transmission lines, not for replacement of transmission line poles where they already exist. And air and water pollution would still be addressed. Under the flexible due process analysis for administrative contested case hearings from Matthews v. Eldridge, the Supreme Court case in 1976 dealing with the Social Security disability benefit hearing, stated that when reviewing whether you should have additional procedures or hearings, you should consider a balancing test, consideration of the private interest affected by the official action, the risk of erroneous determination and probable value of additional safeguards, and the public interest and administrative burdens that additional substitute procedures would entail. In this case, since the 7-207E2 criteria analysis really isn't necessary for this work here on the industrial property to replace the existing line, there's not really a risk of erroneous determination in granting the waiver to allow the work to proceed. And the private interest is mainly in favor of granting the waiver, and there's no significant public interest, and there would be an additional administrative burden should the Commission not grant a waiver and require a certificate of public convenience and necessity hearing under 7-207.
So would you at least agree that some of the bullets for justification for good cause in granting a waiver are not arguments in favor of a waiver versus a CPCN process, but are indeed arguments for the project itself going forward? I didn't hear all that in there, but I was listening.
I would agree that both the companies and the staff write-up emphasizes the completion of the work as supporting the project.
So the completion of the work will mainly benefit the company and the developers on that property as it's contained there, but all of the ratepayers will pay for it. What type of analysis goes into the cost, not just the benefits, but the cost of this project? In other words, what will we not analyze in a waiver if we grant a waiver here, as opposed to what we would analyze in terms of cost of the project and the benefit to the ratepayers at large going forward under the CPCN process? Do we know what the cost of this is going to be? I'll ask it in a simpler way.
We did not inquire on the cost of this project.
Right, and so that gets to my point. It's not a simple matter of waiver, because if we don't analyze the cost, all the rest of the ratepayers are going to bear the cost of this, but the benefits will accrue mainly, it appears to me, to only the developer and the company applying for the waiver. And that's troubling. That's a bit troubling to me, because once we grant the waiver, the costs are going to be essentially approved, not even knowing what they are. But in a CPCN process, I bet you we would get them.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioners. DeAndre Wilson speaking on behalf of staff. Just to speak on the on your question about the bullet points that were provided in the report. Staff saw it as not as us giving reason as for the good cause, but the causes that the utility provided to us as to, we wanted to make sure that we provided in the report what they were saying as their cause as to having the project. But the first bullet point that we have under there is what staff was concerned about, and that was the reliability of the system. From what we understood, the owners of the property, TPA, were going to make this redevelopment regardless. They have the right to make this redevelopment as far as we understand. Utility, I feel, is coming in to try to provide some level of reliability on their end as far as the operation of this new redevelopment. At the moment, they have a 115 kilovolt transmission line which services this area. The utility wants to make this upgrade so that they can operate, or they can control operation on the lower ends of this transmission line, which are in the areas of 34 kV, I believe they stated. The property owner has been running a private network lower than 115 kilovolts, as far as we understand. So they've been operating on a 34 kV for just their property. So I believe the utility wants to come in and make modifications to the transmission line that they're servicing in order so that they can have somewhat control of reliability over that lower end of those.
I appreciate that, and all of that could be assessed and evaluated under a CPCM process as well. I'm not arguing about the efficacy of, or the need even, for the project. I'm talking about the process. Do we waiver it, or do we send it through a more robust evaluation under the CPCM process? That's all I'm talking about. I'm not arguing about the merits of the project.
Staff staff didn't on behalf of staff, myself, I didn't see it as a project where the utility was looking to expand their footprint or build a new transmission station to service more customers or things. I saw this as a utility trying to compensate for what a customer is doing on their end, which they really can't control. So they're coming in to try and compensate so that they can have some control or some reliability over that. Right. That's how staff saw it. The utility is here; they can speak more on to as to what their understanding was. As far as the cost, we didn't inquire about the cost. We were more concerned about the reliability, engineering, or the good cause of if we saw a good cause for the project. And the way we see the cost is we're not as far as the owner, or TPA being the owner of the project, we don't know if they were footing the cost for these upgrades and things that cost. I'm not sure. The utility can speak better to that, but that's just as far as where staff kind of stood for this filing.
I appreciate that. Maybe this company will be able to illuminate how much the cost of this project are going to be, and that will maybe be instructive to me.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Yeah, Commissioner.
Mr. Dean, it appeared to me, if I'm summarizing the staff, that the good cause is based in significant part on the fact that this is a industrial site and there's no residents, there's no homes in the area. Would I have that correct?
And also for the fact that it's basically a rebuild of the existing line.
Right. Okay. So it's a rebuild of the existing line, and there's nobody's aesthetics, nobody's home is impacted.
That's correct.
Okay. Has the commission granted a waiver of a CPCN in previously on a similar basis? Do you know?
I believe the staff comments on page 7 note a prior waiver that was granted for some minor work on over a transmission line.
Right, but it didn't say whether that was on, that didn't have any reference to the fact that it was because it was on an industrial site and there wouldn't be any homes impacted.
No, that one, as I recalled, was not on an industrial site.
Okay. And did you inquire, because these were for expected load increases, did you inquire as to how likely those load increases are to arise? You know, it's for development, but the development hasn't happened yet because they're currently serving the existing load, you know.
If you're talking about the stability of the electric system, the ability to handle the load, previously this was powering the steel mill at Sparrows Point, so I don't believe the warehouses that we're talking about are going to exceed the load for those two substations.
Right, but I understand there was some concern with the age of the existing substations as well. But, and, well, I'll check with the company on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yeah, I just wanted, I think some important points have been raised. I just would like to understand, too, so when we issue the waiver, that means there will not be a PPRP review. Is that correct? Or does it, I guess, shorten or decrease the level of review by the PPRP, Power Plant Research?
The PPRP would not develop a formal review of an analysis that they normally file in the CPCN cases. That's correct.
And does PSC staff consult at all with PPRP? Look to their expertise at all in developing the recommendation for a waiver?
Well, we did contact PPRP, and I noted it in my discussion. It wasn't in the staff write-up because it was the response was received after the staff write-up was submitted. I can give you a copy of the email I received from PPRP if you want to add that to the record.
Okay, and overall, did they concur that this warranted a waiver, or did they have any comment whatsoever about the waiver process?
The quote in the email is, they do not object to granting an exemption.
Okay, they do not object. Also, of course, and if the PPRP does not do its analysis, then there's not is it the 6 or 7 state agency review as well? Is that correct?
Yes, but I noted that they did identify the wetlands in the work area and noted concerns on the soil contamination.
Okay, but generally, Energy Administration, MDE, DNR, the rest of DNR, Transportation, they're not notified necessarily that this is happening if there's a waiver process, unlike they would be if they had gone through a CPCN process.
Well, there's the normal permits that you need to get for doing work. For example, if you're doing work above the freeway, you would need to, before starting the work, contact the Maryland Highway Administration, if that's what you're talking about.
I guess that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
they would just follow the normal processes that the company uses for all work, which impacts those types of agencies.
Okay, but overall, there wouldn't be a process that goes through input on conditions and that aspect of the whole process. If we just go right to a waiver,
there would not be a process that gathers all that information and puts it in a single document.
Okay.
It would just happen prior to the work being done.
Okay, so this is a pretty significant shortcut. When we go and consider a waiver, it eliminates a lot of steps and it eliminates a lot of state parties. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say it eliminates the state parties. It just makes the contact of those parties occur at a different point in the process. It's the parties are contacted the state agencies would be contacted prior to the work.
Well, they're contacted, but they don't really have a lot of input at that point. Other than the normal, yes, you have to get a permit, but as far as looking at the project holistically in the CPCN process, that's where they would not have that opportunity. And then to provide also input as far as conditions. Is that correct?
They would not be able to provide that in a large document. They would provide those conditions prior to the start of the work when contacted. Just because the company contacts them prior to the start of work doesn't mean that the agencies won't require the...
I hear you, okay. There's a certain efficiency, I think, to the CPCN process as far as getting that information. Would you at least agree with that?
Yes, sure.
All right, great. All right, thank you. Yeah, it seems that we do need to be very thoughtful and deliberative when we consider these waiver requests. So we do have the company.
Before you go to the company, I want to ask.
Okay.
So I had some questions along the same lines on the CPCN. Normally, when conditions are attached to a CPCN, we require some kind of filing or proof of compliance with those conditions. That way we know that the conditions that are put on by PPRP or other state agencies in that review process are complied with as we go through the CPCN. How does the commission maintain its control over, I mean, clearly PPRP has given us two conditions. They're giving us a wetlands condition and they're giving us a Brownsfield mitigation condition. How do we ensure compliance with those conditions? We, the commission, not some other agency, but how do we do that?
Excuse me, your predicate isn't exactly correct. Most of the time, we do not receive compliance with the conditions. Most of the conditions basically state the state regulation and require the company to comply with that condition. There's no reporting or anything like that back to us that the condition was complied with.
So I think there has been in some instances on certain conditions, but even if I accept that I'm incorrect on that, we still control that CPCN and its issuance. Once we waive, we have no control over compliance with anything, as I see it. There are CPCNs out there that if the conditions are not met, I can guarantee you, we have control over that CPCN and its issuance. So to suggest, okay, here's the question. How do we ensure compliance with the two conditions that PPRP has suggested to us?
Well, normally for those conditions, the Maryland Department of the Environment would be the...
And where are those conditions memorialized?
I'm not trying to argue with you.
Okay.
I'm just... normally, for work on a transmission line, the company would contact MDE and they would, well...
Where are the conditions memorialized?
They're not memorialized in our documentation here.
Thank you.
Is the answer to your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We do have the company represented, but do you have
Good morning, Mr.
anything you'd like to say?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Commission, Damon Krieger on behalf of Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. First of all, let me say thank you to staff for its thorough and thoughtful analysis of our request. The redevelopment of the Sparrows Point property is a very exciting project, and it represents an incredible partnership between BGE, Trade Point Atlantic, the state of Maryland, Baltimore County, Maryland Department of the Environment, the Army Corps of Engineers, the commercial tenants there, and a whole host of other stakeholders. This is probably, to go to some of the questions that have already been asked, this is an incredibly regulated piece of land. We are partnering with MDE on an almost daily basis. They review, they consider, they approve our work. All of the work that happens on this industrial site, as you can imagine, there are almost 100 years of contaminants that have been on this property as a result of the prior steel activities. So this is a highly regulated parcel. So to say there are no conditions is really missing the point, in that there are robust permitting processes. There are site-wide agreements in place that are enforceable by MDE, by EPA, by others, to ensure that things are done properly. So there's a lot more to this. In terms of what we're talking about today, it's site. It's should the line go in a specific place, and that line's already there. It's an existing line. So the real question as part of this waiver request, which is under the discretionary prong, and there's only been one other case out there considered by the Commission under the discretionary prong. We've probably had about 40 or 50 under the mandatory prong, but there's only been one other under this discretionary prong, is whether there's good cause to avoid the need to reopen the siting decision, which has already been made. The line's already there. And the good cause, and I think staff has articulated it well, is that, for one, it's an industrial site, right? So in terms of the impacted parties have already expressed their consent to where that line should be located. In fact, TPA, the developer of the site, has given us the property that we need to move it in order to supply the new substation. So those are the types of decisions that the CPCN process all is about. Should it go in a specific place? And again, it's already there. It's an existing line. So to reevaluate that siting decision doesn't seem to be necessary in this instance. So there's good cause for avoiding the need to reopen that siting decision, because the impacted parties are all in accord, because there is substantial, and I mean substantial, regulation by MDE and others to ensure that the work is done properly and in accordance with site-wide health and safety plans. The two conditions, and I don't want to say conditions, but the 2 points that PPR raised, and if you look at the email, was that they wanted to make sure that those were addressed outside of the CPCN process, and they are being addressed. That's the developer's burden in the first instance, and then through BGE's work submittal plan to MDE to get their approval. They, again, sign off on all the activities on the site. So those are all being addressed. That's what the permitting process is about. That's what the agreements are about that are in place with MDE and other important parties. In terms of cost, this is a FERC jurisdictional asset, so cost recovery is determined at FERC. They will go through a prudency analysis, just like the Commission would do here on the distribution side, to ensure that all costs expended incurred by BG and sought to be recovered from customers are prudently incurred. So that's the FERC jurisdictional role in terms of evaluating the cost recovery. And then, again, in terms of compliance, there is robust government, both, and not just the state side. I mean, we have the federal side, state side, and the local side, because there's a whole Baltimore County permitting process as well. So there are a lot of interested parties that are very actively involved with this construction project, and it will be getting robust oversight. So I think that's important for the Commission to have that reassurance that this isn't just let's put it aside and sort of streamline something to avoid oversight, because there is substantial oversight for this particular project. And so it's important to keep that in mind. With that, the project as a whole is incredibly important to ensuring the safe and reliable supply of electricity to the peninsula. If you've driven by there recently, you can see the incredible construction activities that are going on there. Amazon, Under Armour have these facilities that are probably 3-4 football fields wide. They're gigantic. It's a transportation hub, shipping, rail, truck. It's a really incredible development project for the state, for the county, and so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commissioners may have.
Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate your presentation. I'm familiar with the project, and I do know it's very important to the state and to the county. And for me, it would have been helpful to have had some of the information you just provided about the involvement of PPRP and MDE and some of the state agencies as part of the application. So I think this additional information does help in making the case for a permissive waiver. So again, I appreciate that. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Commissioner.
How much does the project cost?
I have the project manager here, so I can answer that question.
Okay. Specifically.
My name's Al Alford. I'm the project manager for the full development of BG&E's assets down at Trade Point Atlantic. For the cost of the transmission line itself, we're probably in the ballpark of $35 million. Once we get the final detailed design and engineering, we go out for bid and get the final cost. We have good conceptual estimates right now of what the cost is going to entail.
And so that's the new line, and aren't there some substation adjustments occurring here as well?
Yes, there's also a new Fitzel substation. The two other substations that are being demoed, the finishing mill and the steel side substations, they were both jointly owned between Best Steel and BGE. BGE owned the transmission side of it, and Best Steel, now Trade Point Atlantic, owned the low side of those stations and operated the electric distribution grid on TPA property at one point in time. We estimate the total investment on the whole peninsula to be, around $100 million between the transmission and the substation asset work.
So for me, just so everybody's clear, I'm very familiar with the project. I'm very familiar with the importance of the project. I'm very familiar with the state's involvement with the project. But this is not a small project. It's not a never mind. It's $100 million that the ratepayers are going to bear. Now, we have a limited, as Council points out, we have a limited involvement in this process because we don't approve cost recovery, because it is at a federal level. But that's part of the only hook that we have in any of this when we have these discussions, when we expand transmission systems, is the CPCN process. That's the only hook we have. And when we go start waiving it easily on $100+ million projects, we lose our chance to really evaluate what's going on with the project. Look, all the arguments I hear today are in favor of the project, and I probably agree with most of them. That's not my point. My point is understanding fully the decision that we're making today and the good cause need for a waiver. Let me ask this. Let me follow up with this. Are there any time deadline requirements for us to take a little closer look at this and get some more detailed cost information into us? Will we jeopardize anything? Do you have any deadlines coming at you?
Yeah, we're scheduled to start construction in July, so we've already pre-mobilized. We're already moving forward, and at all times with the sequencing of construction in terms of the substation, in terms of the abandonment, they have to switch load off of the old substation. You got to remember the history here is this was a customer-operated distribution network. So we're in effect, pulling off their network where we have to reconfigure all the load. We have to move them off the old substations. They have to abandon those substations as part of their development project, and then we have to ultimately supply them temporarily from other sources, and then ultimately from Fitzel, from the new substation. So yeah.
So do we have would a week or two set you back? Are you telling me that we can't bring this up on the next admin meeting and take another closer look at it because it would impact your project?
I'm sorry. I mean, the project manager is saying a week or two is not going to impact it, but more than that, you would.
Do we know when our next admin meeting is scheduled?
July 3rd.
July 3rd? July 3rd? You'd be okay?
I won't be here, unfortunately. I'm away that week, but we'll have to figure that out. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think the arguments have been made by staff, by us, in terms of the siting requirements for this particular application.
Yeah, well, CPCN looks at more than just siting. It looks at a lot of other things, not just siting.
I think respectfully, I guess, challenge that in terms of the overall purpose of the CPCN statute is to look at where the line goes. It's already there. The decision was made previously. So it's in terms of the route, because it is a routing determination, and that's what the waiver is all about. From the original construction of the waiver statute, it was to basically alleviate, based upon a decision that the commission had made in what was called the Bagley bypass case, where there was a decision made as to the plain language construction of the statute at the time, whether the commission could waive anything or whether everything had to go through the full CPCN process. And ultimately, the commission, everybody came together and made sure that there was a proper waiver process in place to ensure that with respect to existing lines, if the situation had not changed from the original determination that the line should go there. And in the case that Mr. Dean mentioned, the one case where a good cause was determined, that was through a purely residential community. I mean, that was Hartford, Baltimore County. So this is an industrial site, and that involved, I think, even a larger scope of work. There were as many, if not more, towers involved, and the commission determined that there was good cause for a discretionary waiver. So, this is probably less, I would say it is less impactful than the decision that the commission has already reached in that prior case.
I request if the commission does decide to delay a decision on this till the next admin meeting, pending further information, that the company provide a little more robust information on what it's going to cost the ratepayers when it does get the cost allocation at the FERC. Just so I understand it, because I think it's part of my obligation to understand some of the decisions we're making.
I'm not sure if we have rate impact information yet, but in terms of gross estimated cost of the project, that is something.
Just estimates. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Herman.
So just to be clear in my mind, if the substation costs, we would see those in a future rate case, is that correct?
It would be a combined, I think. There's a portion of it would be split, so the high side would be FERC jurisdictional, the low side would be a distribution, so there would be a sort of 50-50, let's say, hypothetically.
So the part that we might have authority over, we would see in a future rate case.
That's correct, you would.
Okay. And
just like any substation. That's
right.
Any distribution system.
And in the CPCN process, PPRP, I believe, sort of serves as a consolidating role. They take all of the state agencies and kind of work with them all together and then come up with a set of conditions. Do I have that right?
That's correct. So in this case, MDE would be one of the agencies that PPRP would consult with, and so obviously PPRP looked at it from their perspective, and MDE is very involved, as are the other state agencies.
Right, and so all of the permits and all of the permitting that is required under a CPCN, sort of on a consolidated basis, is taking place on this project, what I heard you say, on a individual basis. So a permit, if they were to impose a condition, the permit would include the condition, and the company would be required to comply with that as part of that particular permit, and you might have 12 permits instead of one set of conditions.
Well,
is that correct?
In either situation, we would still have all these other permits. And most of the time, I think as Mr. Dean indicated, the conditions in a CPCN application are simply embodying the obligation that is still present to obtain the permits, to comply with whatever, as far as stand delineation, whatever it may be, that is already present. So here we have the Army Corps, we have MDA, we have Baltimore County. All these permitting agencies are reviewing, issuing permits, and signing off. And then in addition to that, TPA has a master site-wide plan that requires, because of the environmental concerns, MD involvement to a much larger degree than might otherwise be present on a site that's not similar in scope, which we have to go through that process and get their sign-off, which we have for the substation and for the transmission.
Right. Okay. And it's TPA is the owner of the site, is that correct?
They are Trade Point Atlantic. That's
right. And so in terms of, I noticed that in the staff write-up, it said something about talking to the customers of, those like Under Armour. Do they lease the land from TPA, or are they individual owners within the site?
They are leased. They are tenants.
They're tenants.
So
that's what I thought.
Sparrows Point owns. In most cases, I think they may be considering different options, but for the big tenants right now, the anchor tenants, they are leasing.
They're leasing it, right? But they did receive notice of the. I thought I saw in the staff comments they received notice, the tenants as well.
We've been working with them very closely.
Right.
There's been TPA has been organizing even public stakeholder meetings where we've attended. We've sent representatives, not just about this project, but the distribution work, everything that's going on there.
Right. So there have been public meetings, that have been. And how public have those been? Do you know? I mean, have they sort of, is it just the tenants who were invited, or sort of the neighboring communities? That sort of
they
thing?
were like open houses for certain. I don't know how many. They have them twice a year. Quarterly over the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are just open stakeholder meetings that anybody can attend.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Excuse me. Commissioner O'Donnell touched on a topic that I was a little concerned about with this, and it's the process that was taken to bring the request for the CPCN waiver to the Commission's attention. Clearly, this is a project that's very large. It's been going on for some time now. A lot of money invested in it. And it appears almost as if the request for the CPCN waiver, either under good cause or some other standard, almost seemed to be a foregone conclusion. It's kind of like it's presented to us now, and according even to TPA's letter, and I'll read directly from it, in order to supply the new substation and meet the forecasted loads, it is essential that BG be in a position to begin construction activities. It goes on to say as soon as possible. So I guess my question is, was there ever any consideration that a waiver would not be granted here? And if so, what type of impact was that going to have on the project as a whole?
That's a good question. We did engage our staff as early as we could once the real property was settled with TPA to determine the exact route. But based upon our evaluation of the nature of the project, the request a waiver, and the prior good faith waiver that we came in for not too long ago, I think it was 6-9 months ago, our conclusion was that a waiver would be granted, would be warranted in this case.
So if the Commission does decide that a waiver is not valid, not appropriate under good cause, and this process has to then go through the CPCN process, which will take longer than the request for a waiver, what impact does that have on the project? And have the developers and the utilities, everybody else, consider that as part of the overall development strategy?
We have apprised them that there's always a possibility that the Commission could deny our request for waiver. And so to the extent that happens, then that's really probably a question for the project manager, but it could impact our ability to safely and reliably serve the new load as it comes on through the plant over the next couple years. We have to shift things. It could require us to serve from different places. We wouldn't have fit cell operational, so we'd have to rely upon existing substations, existing sources to supply the load, and that could impact the project plan. But let me ask Mr. Alford.
Sure.
Any delays in the project are definitely going to jeopardize the economic development that's taking place down at Trade Point Atlantic right now. I mean, besides the facility, the huge warehouses that are that are completed construction, and we supplied service from further adjacent, distribution substations. At this point in time, they were only temporary supplies that we were building into these things. We were planning looking forward to be able to tie in Fitzell substation to provide the reliability needed, for these very large, commercial, industrial type manufacturers down that are on site. So, the reliability to those critical, and economic development down on this peninsula will be in jeopardy if we don't, put this substation in service by December of 2020.
And just as a reminder, the overhead transmission is, of course, a very important part, but it's one part of the overall involvement of the utility. There's gas distribution infrastructure, there's electric distribution infrastructure that we're completely rebuilding, extending to all these new tenants as they come online. There's street lighting. There's a whole host of aspects of this project in which we're involved to ensure that they can move forward with their development. And of course, all those extensions are under our tariff and so on and so forth. And so this is a pretty substantial undertaking. And this is one piece of that important part of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions?
No.
Does staff have any other information they'd like to provide, or any other comments?
We have no further comments. If the commission does want to defer this, staff would have no objection.
Okay. Well, great. Maybe we can just have a brief discussion here. I'm in a my position is I'd be happy to support, if it's your motion, that we defer this till July 3rd. And I agree that it would be good, part of that motion, to maybe, if we have from the bench any additional questions we'd like to have answered by July 3rd, maybe we could make that known now. But I'll defer to Commissioner O'Donnell, then Herman and Linton.
I'd very much like to do that, Mr. Chairman, pending submission of some cost estimate information from the company, broken down by major components, the conductor, the substations, and with a jurisdictional breakdown, just so I have a sense of what the costs are. And I also would like to say, this is not about the merits of this project for me. It's about understanding all aspects of this project and granting this waiver, or whether or not, for instance, MEA doesn't issue permits, but in the CPCM process, MEA would have a formal role in that process. In this case, they do not have that if we grant a waiver. So I want to fully understand at least the cost, as a minimum, the cost of this project, and if it means deferring a week, so be it.
Commissioner Herman?
I was prepared today to grant the waiver under these very specific situation. My concern, I do have some concern with the timing. I will tell you that, I think it's difficult to put the commission under, approve it today, or we have a problem, because this is not something that we do routinely. And so we've only done it once and before, but in this very specific situation, I would have been prepared to vote on it and approve it, but I won't object to a deferral.
Okay.
But I do ask the company and to the extent our staff has any input on that, to ask future these kinds of filings that are new to us and really important, to try to make sure we have appropriate time to review it.
Thank you. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually agree with Commissioner Herman that I was also prepared to approve today. Again, with the very limited conditions that we've already discussed, I'm not going to object to delaying this for another week or two, because I do think there's some additional information that we need. There's a lot of empty seats in the room for a project that's as large as this one. And so I would have liked to have seen some of the other parties that were engaged in this for an extensive time here to answer those types of questions for this part of the process, which is clearly important to the overall project. I'd also like to know if the Commission does decide to not grant the waiver, what type of impact that would have from a cost perspective, from a project development perspective overall for this entire project. So that's where I am.
Great. I think with that, and I guess the additional information I would like to get is just polling the various state agencies. A lot of state resources are going into this project from MDE and from transportation. So I would like to have some. I would like to know that they are aware of this waiver request, and that they support it, and and if there are any implications to some of the other state projects that might be impacted. When I say state projects, the other state inputs to this project, if they're impacted and if they're being considered as we move forward with this particular waiver request. So with that, then maybe I will move that we defer this then to July 3rd a.m.
I'll second it for the purpose of a discussion point.
Okay.
I want to make clear, because I think it's a good opportunity as well, Mr. Chairman. I think I came into the proceedings today thinking I was going to support this, but during the conversation, and it highlights the importance of the conversation and the tone of the conversation, I thought I needed to take a little time to get a little more information, and so I think that's an important point to make under discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. There's no other discussion. I guess I will move that we defer this to July 3rd administrative meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is adopted.
Thank you.
And the last item on the administrative agenda, item 11, is Washington Gas Light Company, filed on June 7, 2018, notification of the change in Prince George's County energy tax.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by Washington Gas Light Company notifying the Commission of the change in the Prince George's County energy tax. The sales tax rate for energy authorized under the Maryland Code is applied to customer bills in Prince George's County at the tax rate specified by the County Council. As a pass-through tax on sales, the rate is not adjusted by the Maryland Gross Receipts Tax or the PSC assessment, nor is it grossed up for federal income taxes. Effective July 1st, 2018, the Prince George's County energy tax imposed on natural gas consumption will increase from 5.7534 cents per therm to 8.4949 cents per therm, resulting in an average increase of $1.52 per month for residential customers. Normally, a utility is required to provide at least 30 days' notice of new or changed rates. However, in this instance, the county does not give utilities sufficient lead time to allow a 30 days notice period. Staff recommends that the Commission note the filing and waive the 30-day notice period of Public Utilities Article Section 4-203A.
Great, thank you. Can I just ask a question of staff? When these types of changes, and this is not inconsequential, $1.52 residential impact, is there a notification that goes out or information that goes out to the customer why this has occurred?
I am not aware of any such notification other than what they see on their bills, or what they may hear, for example, in the media about the county council's actions in doing this.
Yeah, I live in Prince George's County, and I knew there were things in the 2019 budget, but until this, I didn't realize what some of those little surprises were in the budget. So other than that, that's pretty much where citizens would get this information.
That's my understanding. But I'll see if Mr. Patterson knows any.
Okay, and I was also going to ask: is it within the if it's not, I mean, within the authority of the commission to maybe require that some kind of a statement or an insert or something be included in the bill to explain why this increase is taking place?
Felix Patterson on behalf of staff. The commission always has the authority to request the company give the ratepayers notice that a rate is going to change. So you can request the utility to put some type of bill insert in there. As far as we know, there is no bill insert that was presented to us, or no way of notification to say that this rate was going to change. It is a flow through. It is something that most of the jurisdictions do. They use the utility company as more or less a collection agency to collect this tax. I guess you might call it a revenue enhancer for the state and for the cities. So it's nothing unusual in nature, but I'm not aware of them putting a bill insert in there for a change in this type of rate.
Okay. Yeah, I know when we go through rate cases, I mean, we try to get the information out the best we can through press releases, and again, this is a fairly significant impact on people's electric bill, and still fresh in my mind some of the public hearings we did in Prince George's County, and we heard that there's a lot of pain out there. People are very concerned about their electric bills. So anyway, that's the impression is it would be probably helpful for them to know why this increase is taking place. But are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask about the percentage increase. My calculations look like this is a 47% increase in the gas energy tax in Prince George's County. Is that right?
That's about right. Yes, Commissioner.
That's a large increase. Do we see these very often?
Depends on the council. Depends on the depends on the county. Again, they're trying to find ways to supplement their budget. That's basically what this is about. So they're looking at their budget and they're saying, well, in order for us to put a certain amount of dollars in our budget, we need this type of increase. So yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
It's not normal, but yes, it can happen.
I know Prince George's County is tax limited under TRIM, but I have rarely, in my several decades of public service, seen a 50% increase in a tax. That's very significant, or this is just under 50%. Did any of the other taxes change? Just the gas? Did electricity change?
This is the only one that staff has so far.
Okay, because it says, you know, it lists 4 types of energy here on June 30th, and I'm wondering if any of the other 3, besides gas, had changed from their previous value.
We have no notification of it.
Okay. Wonder why they just picked the one type of energy.
I'm not sure about that. This energy tax has been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, I know, but it's available, says, at least per the Prince George's County sheet that I got yesterday, looking for this letter. It says the same rate should be used for commercial and residential accounts, and it lists the type of energy, electricity, and it's 0.009900 per kilowatt hour, natural gas, 0.084949 per therm, fuel oil, almost 20.1 cents per gallon, and propane over 21 cents per gallon. And I'm just wondering if any of those had gone up, and why they just picked this one form of energy if they didn't.
Well, we haven't got any notification that any rest of them were going up. This is the only notification that we got.
Right. We might want to check on that with the county, see if these other values had changed, because if they have, we're probably going to have to deal with them.
Yep. Thank you, Council. Commissioner.
Are there any other questions for the staff? We have the company, Mr. Dodge.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. John Dodge, appearing on behalf of Washington Gas. Really nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions as I can.
Mr. Dodge, do you know if any of the other energy forms had a tax increase, or why natural gas was singled out?
I do not know that we were singled out. It would be difficult for me to believe that a 50% jump in our tax rate was not accompanied by similar jumps in other energy tax rates, but I just don't know.
Okay.
And I would like to make one comment. We throw around the word rate a little loosely today. This is a tax on the customer. We are a pass-through or collection agent, as Mr. Patterson says. We do not have control over this. The company doesn't make any money on this. We're simply calculating, collecting, and remitting the tax to the county.
I would just opine that that's not widely understood by the ratepayers, because all they see is the rates that are charged by the company and set by the commission.
I can add, I don't believe in the past we have been required to send out bill inserts on this. I believe we have in the past used our social media channels to get out this sort of information, because it is not a base rate change. It's a tax change, and frankly, we do not have time to prepare and submit a bill insert for the July 1st billing period. I can commit to checking to see if we have time to do social media updates.
So that's kind of where I was headed, Mr. Dodge. I understand that, nor do I want to add cost onto, an additional cost by doing a bill insert, which I know would normally have some extra cost associated with it. But there are other ways to notify customers through the website, through, social media, potentially. I don't know if you have a bill message that, if you have a short message area that doesn't have any charge, but you could, your bill now reflects an increase in Prince George's County energy tax, that kind of thing. So has the company done that in the past when you have increases in the tax?
I believe in our former bill format, we did that. We fairly recently migrated to a new bill format. I don't know that we still have that open block, if you will, to change on a monthly or regular basis. I can check that. Again, even if that block or opportunity does exist, I am confident that we do not have an opportunity to input text regarding this change for the upcoming billing cycle.
Oh, I understand. I just, and again, nor do I want to add any additional cost on top of the additional cost. So to the extent, I would urge the company to do what they can to let customers understand, the basis for this increase, and hopefully the customers will see and understand that.
I'm confident we can commit to doing both website and social media channel updates on this, perhaps as soon as early next week. We have some people in and out, given the warm weather. I would also say that these rates do not always go up. Last year, our rate went down in Prince George's County, so I think Mr. Patterson is correct. It is directly tied to budgetary needs or perspectives on the local level. I'm not here to defend anybody's tax policy, but they don't always go up.
Mr. Chairman, could I request staff, regardless of what we do on this item, request staff provide to us the history, just so I can understand how one county operates, the history of the rates for these 4 energy forms in Prince George's County over time? Tax rates?
Yes, staff will provide that to you.
Thank you.
Actually, may I just put one caveat? To the extent that we have a letter similar to what we have today, and that gives all 4 rates, we can do that, or that we can get that from the county. There is the possibility that with respect to rates that don't come through the commission, that is, other than electricity and gas, that we might not be able to obtain that information. So I just wanted to be clear about that.
Electricity and gas would be helpful. They're probably the lion's share anyway, so.
We will do our best, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lewis, do you have a question? Great. Well, I would just join Commissioner Herman and O'Donnell that I would also like to just urge the company to take the initiative, whether, again, I agree, I don't want to add additional costs on top of all this, but if there is a place on the electric bill or, any types of social media, because I think it's in the company's interest, and I think it's in the commission's interest that people understand that our actions today here are not the reason for the increase in people's electric bill, but, it was, a decision made by the county government. And as I was, as a Prince Georgean County resident, I noted in the budget that I think there are some other energy taxes that will be flowing through, so we may be seeing, hearing from PEPCO soon to have a similar function. So I think it's important to know that for customers to know, for citizens to know that that's the reason for this increase. So I won't suggest anything that we would do on the actual motion, but other than just joining in 3 of us urging that the company do that.
We will, and we will provide you a letter report in the next several business days.
Appreciate that. Great.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would also urge that same thing too.
Okay,
I don't,
sorry,
it's not.
no,
it's fine. That's fine. That's fine. But I think that there's a specific reason for it, seeing as though the utility company is the one that's, I'll say, since it's already been referenced as the bill collector, you in effect are paying it prior to receiving the payment from the utility customer, which means that in the unlikely event that the charges accrue high enough, utility customers could actually have their service denied for not paying this tax. So it is valuable for consumers to know that this increase is happening. So I certainly would concur with my colleagues.
Great, thank you. If there are no other questions, is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Herman, did you have?
No, I'll do the motion.
Oh,
if
I'm
you
sorry,
like.
okay. Is
Happy
there a
to do the
motion?
motion. Yes, I move that we note the filing and grant a waiver of the 30-day notice period under Public Utility Article 4-203A.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted. That is our last item, so we are adjourned.